Today we're going to talk about Shakespeare's greatest play, in my opinion, Antony and Cleopatra. This greatest business I realize I use with too great facility. But as I've said before, that's what I'm looking for, greatness, and that's what I think most people are looking for. And one tries to determine relative value of things in everything, coffee or people or whatever. And so Antony and Cleopatra, I think, is it. 1607, the final of the great plays, but I think the greatest. I'll show you why. I'll try to. I would say in advance that, strictly speaking, I don't think it's a tragedy. Strictly speaking, nothing tragic happens unless one counts death, the death of the protagonist, as a tragedy. But in the others, there's this terrible sense of pain at the end of King Lear, just unbearable. And even also in Hamlet, at the end of Hamlet, at the end of Othello, at the end of Julius Caesar, the protagonists die, and it's painful. They made mistakes, they've gained some knowledge, perhaps, but we feel pain at the passing away of these people. In Antony and Cleopatra, it's triumph. The play is about the triumph of love and the triumph of the human heart, and it's a celebration. It's a celebration. Okay. The year, around 33 BCE. Now, after the Battle of Philippi in 43, 10 years earlier, Antony and Octavius were the victors, Brutus and Cassius the losers, the vanquished, and Antony and Octavius took over the Roman Empire. They weren't literally emperors, but all the power was theirs, and they divided it. Octavius stayed in Rome, controlled Italy, and the European Empire, let's say. To Antony fell Greece, Turkey, Asia Minor, and Egypt. Well, when Antony met Cleopatra, we get the description of that in Act 2. Great moment. He fell in love with her, as others had before. Caesar had some kind of relationship with her. Pompey, the greatest of all the Romans, had these relationships with this mysterious woman. She's no longer young when our play begins, and Antony's no longer young either, and that's part of the charm of the play, I think. These are not young lovers. Antony's over 40, certainly. Cleopatra is at least 35. They've been around, but there's a youthful charm about them that is irresistible, and their energy is vast. Any young person could envy the energy of those two. Okay. Now, the play is remarkable on many levels, but one formal level is very striking, and that is the number of changes of scene. There are 35, I think, changes of scene, maybe more, I don't know. But it's changing all the time, shifting from here to here, from Egypt to Rome, to Greece, to, I don't know, shifting all the time. Later I'll explain to you why that's important, but please try to remember it. Okay. We know that there's tension between Antony and Octavius, because their lifestyles are totally different. At the heart of the play is a kind of triangle, and this is true of several of the plays, or at least it's one way to describe the play. It is essential in Othello, I've come to see it as the essence of the play now. Here it's near the core of Antony and Cleopatra too. I'll explain. From this point of view, this play, like Othello, is an allegory. An allegory, I think you know by now, is a story which has a symbolic level of interpretation. Okay. Cleopatra represents the East, represents Egypt, of course, represents the feminine principle, of course, represents sensuality, passion, the heart, feeling, emotion. All these I know almost the same. Also represents religion, mysticism, and it's wonderful the way these two are combined, but Shakespeare combines them, and I think brilliantly. Anyone who disagrees is on Octavius's side. That's a bad side to be on, I think. But not terrible either. Okay, what else? Sexuality, passion, if I didn't say it before, the heart. Okay. Octavius, Rome, duty, head, self-control, morality, is that everything? Puritanism, maybe. Materialism. There we go. Okay. Who's Antony? Antony's both. He's caught in the middle. Because there is some Octavius in him. But in this play, his redemption is that the Cleopatra in him takes over. Okay. No, this is my favorite play, and it's very emotional, and I'm going to try to limit this emotion here, but oh, wow. As soon as I get onto this, it's hard. Okay, here we go. Act 1, Scene 1. The very opening words are wonderful. Antony says, "Nay, but," and Cleopatra interrupts him and says, basically, she's scolding him all the time, because it's a textbook, as I think as well as Shakespeare can do anyway, a textbook account of how a woman can control a man. Cleopatra controls the great Antony. And Antony's a match for anybody. If she can control him, she can control anybody. And he's a puppet almost in her hands. Now, he's a willing puppet. He knows exactly what she's doing. He is anything but a fool. There is no fool. There's not much fool in Antony. He is sharp. He is a man of the world. One of the most intelligent, politically intelligent people who ever to live. Julius Caesar shows that, where he takes over the play in Act 3, when everything might have fallen into shambles. Antony, the younger Antony, Shakespeare's Antony, but history's Antony too, is a genius in his way. Okay, but he is controlled by her, but he knows it, and he lets it happen, and he loves it. And she knows he knows. The level of sophistication between these two and Shakespeare's understanding of them is wonderful. That's why, in a sense, it's a comedy. A comedy in a good sense of the word, because in a sense, everything in the play should be occasion for smiling, for laughter almost, even death. Okay, so here we go. Someone has just arrived from the court of Rome to talk to Antony and tell him that Octavius needs some help, or Octavius wants him to help him in some way. and Antony can't be bothered because he's busy with Cleopatra. So the messenger comes. She's mocking him and saying, "Oh, I think you better be more serious. I think you better be more responsible. You must govern this half of the Roman Empire. And what if Octavius, the boy, because Octavius is 15 years younger than Antony, what if the boy from Rome calls you and says, do this, do this? Or what if your wife," he's married, of course, wife is back in Rome, of course, "what if Fulvia calls and says, do this, you better do it?" She's mocking him. And he's saying, but dear. Delicious. And so the messenger says, "Antony, please listen to me for a minute. Grease me, the sum," he says. A great first early line in any play. 4 words. Grates me, the sum. Grates me means it grates on my nerves. It irritates me. It annoys me. The sum means give me a quick summary, very quick, because I'm busy. I'm busy with Cleopatra. Oh, well, this is such a high level. They are the ultimate lovers. Romeo and Juliet are children, of course. Charming children, but only children. Sophistication, no. A kind of fumbling heartthrob, adolescent. It's an adolescent play, and it's still for adolescents. It's wonderful, but it's for adolescents. Antony and Cleopatra inhabit a different universe of complexity, of thinking one thing and saying one thing, and watching oneself saying these things, aware that both views are wrong, because that's the world that adults live in, frankly. Complexity, where nothing's simple. Things are only simple by wishful thinking. Only children might find things simple. The rest of us, if we think something is simple, we are deceiving ourselves for that moment. I think the play illustrates this pretty well too. Okay, so Octavius says this or this or this. Go away. I'm busy with Cleopatra. So let's see now. They talk about what will they do today? How will they have fun? How will they amuse themselves today? And they do crazy things. They hop through the streets of Alexandria on one foot, or but what everyone says who watches them is that Cleopatra is infinite variety. That is, she knows how to surprise Antony all the time. And Shakespeare's point seems to be, the woman who knows how to do this will control a man. The woman who doesn't runs the risk of losing his love, boring him, and so forth. Interesting. Okay. Things start to happen when, I think in the second scene, by the way, Cleopatra is surrounded by her servants, and her servants are wonderful too. Among them a eunuch, E-U-N-U-C-H, a man who has been castrated. Charmian, Eros, I-R-A-S, I don't remember names very well, but they're minor characters, but they're wonderful. And they love and support, and they too don't quite understand Cleopatra. But they're watching, I'd say they're watching the best show in the world. And they know it. The best show being the Antony and Cleopatra show. It's remarkable. And everyone is affected by it. Okay, so early in the play, Antony gets a message from Rome, and this message is quite serious. Fulvia is dead. Antony, who seems frivolous, of course is not really frivolous, immediately becomes serious, and he says, there's things like, there's a great one dead. I, who wished her dead often, now wish her alive. Loved her, I don't know. Respected her, yes. Realized that, after all, this is a pretty serious business. And for a moment, I must admit, the comedy ceases, though the comedy doesn't totally cease because one watches Antony, one watches that mind thinking intensely, thinking about things, as people tend to do, because Antony now realizes, I'm sorry, I've got to get serious. I've got to break these chains out that this woman has on me. I've got to break these chains and recover my empire. I'm verspieling. It's a great German word. I'm throwing away this vast empire. Okay, let's realize what Antony's saying. He's trying to take the empire seriously. But in this play, in the end, empires are not serious. Empires are not serious. Political power is not serious. And you'll say, but millions of lives are affected by this. On the scale on which Antony and Cleopatra dwell, these are not serious. They're just lots of people doing lots of things. But in the world, lots of people do lots of things. So what? And people die, yes. But people die anyway, yes. But in whatever Antony might do, people will die. Whatever Antony might do, people will be doing things. People will be busy. There will be rebellions and revolutions and wars and peace and all these things. And these are all kind of illusion. But Antony decides, wait. In fact, one of the girls describes him as, and then he had a Roman thought. Meaning, of course, all those things that Octavia stands for. Responsibility, morality, duty, materialism. Because materialism is, to take the empire seriously is materialism. In this play it is, and maybe it is anyway. Because the empire is not serious. The empire in the end is a little thing. And this is what Antony himself will learn sort of in Act 4, and Cleopatra in Act 5 will absolutely grasp. Okay, back to the play. Ha ha ha. So Antony's got to get busy. What he's going to do is go back to Rome. He's got to patch things up with Octavius. Cleopatra rants and raves and fulminates. She's so angry. Yes, go back to Fulvia. Fulvia's dead. Fulvia's dead? Yes, Fulvia's dead. Well, you don't seem very upset. This is how you'll be when I die too. Typical woman, actually. I would say both of in many ways they are atypical man and a typical woman. But they are so excellent. They're so sophisticated and playful too. Okay, so there's nothing Antony can say that will get the better of Cleopatra. In the banter back and forth, she will win every time. She's so quick, and he knows it. Of course, he could end it all by simply slamming his fist in a male way, resorting to a kind of physical violence. At that point, the female must shut up. And that's what happens in the play. He doesn't hit her, but he becomes furious with her, and at those times she hides. But in their bantering love banter, she wins every time. Very interesting. And never forget, he knows that she's winning, and he loves it. Okay, so back to Rome. Even though Cleopatra complains and scolds and complains and scolds. Antony arrives in Rome. Well, this is the meeting between two giants, two gods, by worldly standards, though of course just two men. A moment about Octavius. Octavius is at least as intelligent as Antony. At least. Maybe more. But in matters of the heart, no. On the other hand, he's so intelligent that he knows he lacks this intelligence. He knows Antony's, so to speak, human superiority. He talks about Antony with nothing but high admiration. But of course he doesn't like that Antony is just being a foolish playboy, well, I don't know, a dissolute, a rake, a wastrel, that he's dissipating his energies and his powers and his kingdoms just as if they were toys. He doesn't like that side of Antony. But even that side he kind of understands from a distance. Must remember, he respects Antony tremendously. In one speech before Antony arrives, he says, "Oh, Antony," talking to Antony who's not there, "Oh, Antony, return to your old ways. When you were a soldier, you were the ultimate soldier. In one retreat, you retreated over the mountains with your men, and there was no food. And they walked for days and days and days, no food. And it said that you drank horse's urine, that you ate terrible weeds and terrible things just to stay alive." Full of admiration for this, that is Antony the ultimate soldier, and he is. He was. He is. Octavius is no soldier. Octavius is no lover. But it's part of Antony's huge heart that he is both of these. Okay, and Octavius knows it. And once again, I'll say it again, Octavius recognizes Antony's, so to speak, human superiority to him, and respects it. Okay, Antony arrives. The two talk about things a little bit. It's like two boxers going at it, just sparring, just jabbing, testing each other, looking around, looking for weaknesses, trying to figure out what he really feels. And Antony presents himself as there to be reconciled with Octavius. He's there on business. He knows he has been a playboy, but that's none of Octavius's business. That's none of anybody's business. Antony is the ruler of the East. He can do whatever he wants there. Octavius says, "I agree, you can. But when your wife makes war on me, and your brother makes war on me, I have to wonder, are you on their side or on my side? And when I ask you for help, for ships, or anything, and you don't send it, I have to wonder, and I can't quite, I feel, I want to trust you, but I wonder." That's all he says. And Antony defends himself eloquently on everything. And then, this is fascinating. Octavius's advisor, his top advisor at this time is Maecenas. Maecenas, Maecenas, a very famous man in history, not only because he was fabulously wealthy and the advisor up to Octavius, but also because he is the most famous patron of the arts in history. He supported Horace. He supported Virgil, the two greatest poets, along with Catullus and Ovid, of Roman history. He gave them farms, gave them money, and supported them so that they could devote their time to poetry. Horace has many famous poems about Maecenas. I'll get on that maybe sometime. Okay, so Maecenas is there at this meeting, And Octavius at one point says, if I knew how we could cement, strengthen our bond, if I knew how to do it, I would do it no matter what. Okay, first-time readers think, wow, impressive. And then Maecenas says, I think maybe I have an idea. Speak, Maecenas. Octavius has a sister. Octavia, I guess. God, what's her name? I don't know. A little bit important, too. Sorry. She's a widow. She's beautiful. She's the ideal kind of Roman. Serious. A Roman matron. And most important, she's a widow. Antony's a widower. What if Antony and Octavia, I guess, were to marry? Then the bonds between these two would be very much strengthened. Antony says, Caesar, does Octavius, does Caesar, let's call him, agree? Octavius says, I agree. It's a good idea. Antony, thinking very fast, done. Because if he hesitates, it's disaster. He knows. He must either say no and leave Rome immediately, perhaps even in danger, or say yes immediately. And he says yes immediately. But he already knows, and the sharpest observers already know, what will happen. He will marry Octavia. Will he stay with her? No way in the world. No way in the world. He will find a way to get back to Egypt and Cleopatra. His heart is there. Now, the biggest and most interesting question in this scene is, how much of this does Octavius know? Whose idea was this in the first place? After many times through the play, I feel sure it was Octavius's idea in the first place. He said to Maecenas, at the right time, propose this idea. Well, this is amazing. This is utterly amazing, because this means, does Octavius know what's going to happen? Yes. Does he know that that Antony will find his first opportunity to betray and abandon and humiliate his own sister? He knows it. He knows it. Yet, is he willing to go through with this? Yep. Does this mean he's cold as ice and doesn't love his sister at all? I don't think it does. I don't think it does. This is a political necessity. And the ultimate level of life for Octavius is political. There's nothing beyond. Politics is life. For Antony, Cleopatra is life. It's an amazing thing, and Shakespeare captures it. If I were more scholarly, I would have read Plutarch and the others, sources of Shakespeare, to see what Plutarch might have said, because Plutarch was a pretty sharp man too, as far as I know. I would love to know whether in the sources, people, oh no, they didn't report, no, this is Shakespeare. This is Shakespeare. That is, Shakespeare, with Homer, and Chaucer, the most sophisticated people I know, anyway, of, and Plato, I guess. I'm not sure that Plato belongs there, though. So sophisticated because a sophisticated person thinks on many levels at the same time. If a person doesn't, the person's not sophisticated. But in my opinion, we all are sophisticated, sometimes at least. In marriage, for example, in child rearing, and sometimes in dealings with our friends too. We have to think on several levels at the same time, especially when we make big decisions that may, of which the correctness is at least doubtful. Shakespeare's characters in this play are sophistication incarnate. They are so complex, or their thinking at least is so complex, and we have to try to follow them. Homer again, Homer's characters are this too, especially Achilles. Okay. So he marries her. Then we get the famous scene, the barge scene, really, when Antony. Now I haven't told you about Enobarbus yet. Enobarbus is Antony's advisor. Well, that makes him. I mean, he's a general. He's a super general. He is a military man, a soldier. He's Antony's friend and advisor. He is great. He is so witty, so sophisticated. For example, earlier, when Antony tells Enobarbus, "I've got to get out of here. We've got to leave here. We've got to go to Rome." And Enobarbus says, "Well, then you kill the women. Why don't you just go ahead and kill them?" But then he goes ahead and makes a sexual joke, which will be key to the play. Sorry. The word is die. D-I-E, to die. To die in Shakespeare, and it's not just Shakespeare, in Shakespearean times, can mean, of course, literally to be dead, but it also refers to the sexual climax. The sexual, if you like, orgasm. That is die. And this play is full of it. And ultimately, when the two characters die, also, the secondary meaning is absolutely essential. This is not just Cook. This is not my discovery. Anyone who reads Antony and Cleopatra sees this, is forced on one. The play is about that. In a sense, one can almost say that the play is about the double meaning. Die and die. Yeah. Okay. Enobarbus, very sophisticated, witty, intelligent man. So he and Maecenas, the secondary characters, Antony and Octavius, leave the room to make the deal. And Maecenas asks Enobarbus about their life in Egypt, probably full of envy, because they're Romans, but the level of pleasure in the East was mythical. That is, everything on such a high, elaborate, luxurious level that the Romans, for all their famous pleasures, are kind of barbarians. Okay, the most famous speech in the play, certainly not the best speech, but the barge she sat in like a burnished throne. Okay, Enobarbus describes the first meeting between Antony and Cleopatra. It took place in Cydnus, C-Y-D-N-U-S. Oh my God. I don't know how I'm going to do Act 5. Cydnus is in southern Turkey, right near where I used to live, Adana, Incirlik. Tarsus, right where St. Paul was from, Tarsus. And Cleopatra, Antony was there, waiting to meet the famous Cleopatra. Antony was already, he was an emperor. He sat in the marketplace, everyone bowing to him, and, "Oh, Antony, you're so wonderful," surrounded by courtiers and pomp. But then the message came that Cleopatra was arriving by ship. Everyone left. And Antony was left sitting there alone on his throne. Right away we realize what kind of thing is happening here. Okay, here we go. So the barge she sat in like a burnished throne. It's just a long speech in which he describes the luxurious trappings and surroundings of Cleopatra. Flutes played, gold, silver everywhere. Beautiful little boys fanned her with ostrich feathers of various colors. Splendor, splendor, splendor. Music. Sorry. Here we go. Okay, and so Antony was trotted along with the rest of the crowd to see this tremendous show. Of course, he was overwhelmed, and that was the beginning of their relationship and of their love. Okay, The pleasures of the East, Enobarbus gives them some sense of it, but they are saying, wow, they're just astonished. Because everything is just very sumptuous and luxurious and subtle. And the implication is that Rome, for all its money and power, is unsubtle, not subtle. The East, subtle. Subtle in pleasure, but subtle in other things too. Okay, so then at the end of the speech, Maecenas says, James, this is a really good idea, this marriage, isn't it? I think it's going to work. And Enobarbus says, don't be foolish. There's no way in the world that this will work. Antony's heart is with Cleopatra, and he will find a way to get there as quickly as possible. And Enobarbus knows, but even if Enobarbus weren't Antony's friend, and Enobarbus would know. And the Romans, for all their intelligence, and they're certainly not bad people. I mean, they're not bad people. I have to emphasize that. Octavius is not a bad man. He's a good man. But he exists on a level of politics. Politics is the world, is life. Politics is serious. Antony's not there. He tries to be there, and he can be there. Of course, he could be better than Octavius, maybe. At least his equal. But heart. Okay. So this is exactly what happens. Antony and Octavia get married, and they go off to live in Greece. It's agreed they will live in Greece, closer to Rome, accessible. He gets back there, and right away, let's see now. There's a famous speech, and yeah, it comes now. I think it comes now. Antony talks with a soothsayer. Now that's another aspect of the East, superstition. Along with heart, sensuality, mysticism, superstition. And that's right on the money too, I think. Precisely. So Antony consults a soothsayer and says to the soothsayer, tell me about myself and Octavius. A relatively short little speech, 8 lines maybe, in which he basically said, the soothsayer says, when you and he when you are away from each other, you are God. Antony, you are God. But when you two are in the same room, or in somehow together, his power, the power of his spirit, rises above yours. And Antony says, I know, you're right. It's part of his greatness. It's part of his greatness to understand his own weaknesses. It doesn't change them, but he understands them. It's part of his sophistication that he watches himself doing things. Now, for most people, to watch oneself doing things is to spoil what we call spontaneity. Let's talk about this idea for a minute, because it certainly interests me. The question is, to what degree is a human being capable of spontaneity? Or, another way of saying it is spontaneity simply another romantic myth? After all, if we are spontaneous, we follow our hearts, our feelings, our emotions. And the romantic myth is that that's where we are at our best, that's what we can be. A classical view is that's nonsense. We are never, or almost never in our whole lives, spontaneous. I would mention a couple of times, for example, fear. If suddenly I'm startled, someone makes a loud noise from behind me, I'm startled. Well, that's not a reaction of thought, that's a reaction of feeling, that's fear even. That's spontaneous. But it's questionable whether love, for example, can be spontaneous. A person like Antony and Cleopatra, I think, as Shakespeare depicts them, and maybe any older person, maybe the young in love are somewhat spontaneous, I don't know. And I don't recall myself. I partly believe it, but I think I was just naive. Antony and Cleopatra watching themselves watching themselves. Maybe you can go on more and more. That is, they are aware on so many levels at the same time when they're speaking, when they're thinking, and when they're acting. But this doesn't spoil things for them. This increases their pleasure, the fascination, the charm, the enjoyment of each other, of themselves, of the situation. That's what I mean by sophistication, I think. Okay, so Antony says, I know. If he and I play at dice, the dice obey him. You follow that? The dice obey Octavius. And he knows it. If they play at falcons, an anachronism, that is something out of its time. Antony and the Romans didn't know anything about falconry. That was a medieval Renaissance hobby. An anachronism in Shakespeare, but Shakespeare uses them shamelessly, and who cares? If my bird and his bird fly up, his bird will win every time. Antony knows this. He doesn't know why. He just knows it. The soothsayer is right. It's a great little scene. More sophistication, and Enobarbus knows all this too, of course. And Caesar knows it too. Caesar, there is no fool in Caesar. There's a little fool in Antony after all. He's pleasure and the heart's fool. Caesar is no fool in any sense. And so he's bound to win. In this contest, this inevitable clash between head and heart, head will win. Politics will win. If win means kill the opponent, if that's winning, then yes, politics will win over love. But I'm not sure that's winning, because death isn't losing. The head in politics will die too, after all. When? How? Ignominiously. The heart dies, let's say, in triumph. Okay, what's going to happen? Then they get married, they go to Greece. But very quickly, we see Antony complaining about Caesar's doing this, Caesar's doing that, I don't trust him. He's telling Octavia, his wife, about this, putting her in the terrible position in the middle. But what he's really doing is inventing reasons to go to Egypt, to abandon her. Now, but he knows that by abandoning her, he's declaring war. There will be a war between Octavius and Antony. If he abandons Octavia and goes to Egypt, it's a declaration of war. That means everything will come to play. The whole game will become a very serious game. Once again, if life and death are serious. Okay, but he does it anyway. And off he goes to Egypt. And we get their time together, their glorious time together. Then we get Acts 4 and 5. Acts 4 and 5 are the best, I think, maybe, the best in Shakespeare. Excuse me one second. Okay, Act 4 is basically the Battle of Actium. Now don't forget I mentioned these frequent scene changes. In Act 4 it becomes frantic. Okay, I've got to tell you what's happening here, and I better say it now rather than later. Basically, we have here a kind of enactment of sexual intercourse. The frequent changes of scenery are the frantic activity, comical really. Keep your sense of humor here, friends. Let's keep our sense of humor. The somewhat comical activity of frantic sexual agitation heading toward the climax. And at first Antony will die. Now you remember I told you about die, what die means. Of course he will die. The male dies first. And the male's dying, death, is a spasmodic, comical agitation. Silly, really, and comical. But it comes first. The female's death, much longer, much deeper, much greater, and let's say not comical. And that's what happens in the play. That's exactly what happens in the play. I'm not even suggesting that this is the greatness of the play. The greatness of the play far exceeds this. But it's amazing what Shakespeare does here. It's just amazing. And I'm so glad to talk about this today after talking about Chaucer yesterday, to try to juxtapose and see the merit and greatness. For depth, not just psychological depth, for emotional understanding, Shakespeare has it in Antony and Cleopatra. Chaucer can't reach that. But for profundity, for psychological profundity, insight, understanding, and also abstract ideas, Chaucer has it. For poetry, I think in the end Shakespeare. Shakespeare is the poet, the magician with words. Chaucer is not a magician with words. He is not a lyrical genius. He is a genius, but not a lyrical genius. Shakespeare is that. Okay, here we go. Act 4 is the Battle of Actium. The Battle of Actium took place near Egypt, northern Egypt, between the forces of Octavius and the Romans and Antony's forces. Octavius arrives in Egypt unbelievably quickly. Antony himself can't believe it, how fast Octavius brought his forces to Actium, to Egypt. Antony tries... What's Antony's true attitude toward Octavius? That's a difficult one. He's the boy. But Antony knows how ferocious, use that word again, how tenacious, how determined the boy is. Now, as a military man, Antony's the man. And Octavius knows this too. I think Octavius is counting on Antony making some mistakes. And Antony makes the mistakes. And the amazing thing is, Antony still almost wins. Okay, so Cleopatra has a small but very special elite navy, 60 ships. They're very good, but 60 is not many in this game, where hundreds will be at play. So before the battle, the question is, shall we meet them at sea or on land? Now, Antony has the absolute land superiority. He has veterans who have served him, who love him, men who, probably the best army in the world at that time. Antony's army, best in the world. His navy, questionable. And Caesar sailed there after all, and very quickly. Caesar has superiority at sea. So, in the brief discussion beforehand with his generals, and so shall we fight him at land or at sea? Well, we have the superiority of land superiority. I think land, says somebody. Antony says sea. Sea? Why? Sea. Why? Sea. And then he leaves the room. And his generals say, What is going on here? And Enobarbus explains. Now, it's Cleopatra is the reason. Now, I would like to speculate a little bit about that. It seems to me, anyone who knows male-female relations knows this. Probably Cleopatra was annoyed or angry at Antony about something. This was Antony's way of saying sorry, apologizing. In sexual politics, I think that's exactly the explanation. There is no other explanation. It's not just, I want to be nice to Cleopatra because I love and adore her. No. He owes her. He owes her for something. And this is his way of saying, sorry, please forgive me, I was an ass. Now, what he's doing, though, is throwing away possibly the world. Possible. But the world for Cleopatra? For the heart? No problem. Okay, so Now, what he's doing, though, is shaking the confidence of his most trusted, devoted followers who love him like a god. They love him like a god. In Shakespeare, as in Homer, as in any great author, maybe, we arrive at an estimate of the person by the estimate of the people who are immediately close to him or her. And if those people adore and worship and venerate the person, we know that person is venerable, deserves it, because they know his or her stupidities, his or her irritabilities, his or her follies and frivolities and stupidities again. They know, and they still revere that person, then that person deserves it. And that's how we know. Well, this is certainly true of the people close to Antony and the people close to Cleopatra. As for the people close to Caesar, not so sure. I think they'd sell him quickly, and they know that he would sell them quickly. Utter total trust? Impossible. He's a fox. He's a fox. And the fox will win often, but the fox will not be loved. Antony is loved. And Octavius cannot be loved. Impossible. He loves no one. He cannot be loved. Antony loves many, is loved by many. Okay, here we go. The battle. In the battle, it's close. The battle is very close, even. But suddenly, Cleopatra, who is on one of her ships, gets afraid and calls for a retreat. And her 60 ships suddenly go floating away. And Antony goes running after them. Antony goes running after them. The battle's over. The winner the first day, certainly Octavius. Okay. Enobarbus' reaction. Oh, I've never been so humiliated. The sun should have blushed. The earth should have vomited. This language of hyperbole, by the way, I must mention this. The whole play, oh boy, oh God. Thank you. Okay, I have to talk about language for a few minutes. Because, wow. In the play, we have massive use of hyperbole. Hyperbole. Hyperbole means exaggeration in language. The play is hyperbole. From the very beginning, back to Act 1, Scene 1. I didn't tell you this, but perfect time to tell you now. Cleopatra, remember they're talking, and Cleopatra is kind of scolding and mocking and Antony. And she is saying, how much do you love me? How much really do you love me? Tell me. This is almost irony, Shakespeare on Shakespeare, because wasn't that the opening question in King Lear? How much do you love me? But what different creatures here. Lear is a fool. Lear is a self-absorbed fool. Antony and Cleopatra are no fools, especially in matters of the heart. So when she asks him that, she's perfectly aware that this cannot be put in words, or that whatever he might say would be a lie, basically, a lie. As whatever anybody says, by the way, to such a question, is automatically a lie. Automatically. A distortion. And probably a gross exaggeration. Or, even if it's not an exaggeration, it's still not accurate. Because we can't use language in this way. Okay, and Antony says, then must thou find a new heaven and a new earth. Well, here we go with this huge language of hyperbole. That is, for him to tell her how much he loves her would require a new heaven and a new earth. Well, this is hyperbole, but the whole play is caught up in the language of hyperbole. Later, Antony says, then let Rome melt into Tiber. Tiber, the river that goes through Rome. Let Rome melt into Tiber. And there are 500 lines of such hyperbole in the play. 500. The line is 3,000. I mean, the play is 3,300 lines. 500 of those are hyperbolic utterance. Okay. What's the point? Why so much hyperbole? Well, I would say this. In the end, Antony and Cleopatra, is true, are just humans. They are humans like you and me. They are mortals. They feel pain, they age, and they will die. So there's this basic tension between these middle-aged lovers, okay, somewhat comical almost, though totally aware of their comicality, and the language. The language is here. They're gods. And anyone who reads the play, what happens is the language kind of sweeps us up into believing that they are gods. By language alone, we are swept up to this high plane, and we believe we're there. They are there, and we're with them there. But in the end, these are human beings, and there are plenty of reminders that they are human beings too. Like when Cleopatra hops through the marketplace on one foot, 40 paces, 40 hops. Anybody would be tired at the end of that. She breathes and she sweats, but everyone sees her, even in that condition, as this exalted character. Language has a lot to do with that. By language, they're swept up to this high plane. So there's this tension between the language of hyperbole, which is the language of the heart, and realism, which is the language of the head. This tension. I guess let's say, in the play, hyperbole wins. I guess that's what happens. Hyperbole wins. Now, tomorrow I'll tell you about Act 4 and 5 in greater detail, and especially 5. But hyperbole wins. What's Shakespeare saying? I guess Shakespeare's saying that the heart... How should I say? The heart is much more important than the head. Matters of the heart are important. Matters of the head are not really important. We try to make them important. We try to believe in their importance, but they are not important. Love, like Antony's and Cleopatra's, or even Romeo and Juliet's, I guess, is the best thing in the world. Compared with it, nothing is really important. But where's the role of language in all this? Because Shakespeare, in the end, is a man of language. We all are, much less than he is, but what's the role of language? And I think if language supports the heart, then it's everything. But I think maybe if language doesn't support the heart, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he thinks there. I'm not sure of that question. I'm not sure that he even asked that question. But I'll explore that a little more tomorrow too. Anyway, at the end of the first day, the battle, all is lost. Everyone is feeling disgusted. Many of Antony's followers abandon him, go over to Caesar. And even Enobarbus says, my head and my heart begin to question. What am I going to do? If I follow my heart, I stay with Antony. If I follow my head, I leave him. He's doomed. I guess that's a good place to stop anyway. Thank you.